Hey, deserving listeners, Love is Blind. Let's watch and see what comes flying out of my face.
That feeling that it's right. And usually when I get these gut feelings, I'm not wrong. So I'm really just not sure why he hasn't broken off with the other girl yet. Hello?
Hello?
It's been a weird day.
It's been a very weird day.
Yeah.
Honestly, I've been crying for the last hour.
You have?
Yeah.
Okay, tell me why.
Well, that's not a good sign for Molly. I think that opener typically is to exhibit how hard it was to come to the decision and the action of breaking up with someone, right? So I think Molly is about to be broken up with, and I'm guessing that she is going to take it well I don't know what taking it well involves necessarily. I mean, I guess there are examples of people not taking it well, but that I should say I think she'll take it in stride because that's how she has been, that's the sort of thing she's been doing thus far. But maybe not. Maybe she has been relatively not vulnerable or not fragile seeming because she's been very confident. And I think she had a lot of reason to be confident because Dave, in the beginning of the 10 days, was giving a lot of signals and started talking about rings with her. So, but I don't know, maybe he'll say something different. Or it'll be like Leo and this will just be strung out until it explodes.
Oh, man. I'm just freaked out because I know our conversation earlier.
Yeah.
And I'm freaked out by myself because I'm how can I be such a different person from hours ago?
Right. Yeah. And yeah. I think that happens where 1 minute, 1 hour, you are definitely her. And then the next you're definitely, I think it's going to happen. It sucks when it does, but, I get it can result in hurt. And it's why it's more wise to not be in the moment to express how you feel. Because there were probably moments with Molly that he felt like, yes, Molly is the one for sure in the date with Molly, and would get into conversations about rings or give vibes or, oh, now I've got to break up, or you're my number one or whatever. So the wise thing would be to refrain from saying those things until you knew for sure. Maybe there'd be some guideline of wait until you feel that feeling of number one, you're definitely the one, I'm falling in love. Wait 2 or 3 days, especially if the person that you're with is not thinking about someone else. Not that you're stringing them along, but there's not because the risk would be if you don't say something, they're going to be like, well, he doesn't really like me, so I'm going to pursue this other relationship. I would prefer the first one, but it doesn't seem so. If Molly doesn't have anyone, then there's not a risk of, giving it some time before you say something. And it could hurt even more to the Mollys of the world because it is given and then taken away, seemingly. But on the scale of things, it's going to hurt, but it's better to be hurt here than, 3 years from now when you're cheated on and suddenly divorced, right?
Yeah.
I don't even know what I'm doing.
You were thinking about sending shit.
Well, I didn't say I was going to end it, but I was cool with that until I got into my date with Lauren, and that's when everything in my head started spinning. I come from our dates, I feel so good, and then I go to another one and I just feel all this pressure, and I've been trying really hard to be the best version of myself through it.
Okay, well, there's a lot of ways to interpret that, so let's dig into that one. I mean, I'm laughing or smiling because of the some problematic hypotheses for Lauren, really. Okay, so in one way of looking at it, he is telling Molly, and he either thinks differently around each of the women or will gear. I think this is more likely that he gears his statements more towards. I've said this before, that he exhibits some pleaser behaviors and mentality, some adjustment to the person in the room to please them, but either going against what's really in his heart or not really knowing what's in his heart. And it's like, okay, sister, I'll please you. Okay, Lauren, I'll please you. Okay, Molly, I'll please you. And he might have felt very good about Molly because Molly didn't give off any pressure and he could relax. He is with Molly and doesn't feel that pressure and feels good about it. And then Lauren comes in and basically emotionally abuses him into giving in and saying, okay, I don't want to hurt, I don't want to bother you. And you remind me of my sister and my mom as an overpowering, dominant person who is like angry at me and critical. And I don't want to not have integrity. So Lauren, please, okay, I'll be with you. It has that look to it. Now, whether Lauren is that sort of person or if he's just treating Lauren like that, we could debate. I mean, Lauren definitely had more bite than I think other people would have. But as I was saying then, it's understandable. She's upset. And he's a big boy, Dave. He can make choices himself. And if he has issues unresolved from his past that get triggered when Lauren exhibits a bit of bite to it, then that's not necessarily Lauren's fault, right? It's not a recipe for success, but so that's one angle, is that Lauren is a manipulative, harmful person. And I said this, I think in the beginning, that one of the ways you can look at how puzzle pieces of relationships fit together, that they both have very similar traumas, but cope with it in different ways. And sometimes they'll change modes depending on where they're at. So just who knows? There's not a lot of data, obviously, but if both Lauren and Dave come from histories in childhood of being not attuned to, held to a high standard, or rejected, or some kind of conflict there, some rejection, loss, whatever. And the way that he deals with it is, at least in the beginning of a relationship, is to exhibit callousness, or that he is in control and he's more like cool customer and he's not vulnerable and he's more in the narcissistic end. And then Lauren, in the beginning of those sort of configurations with a similar background, and who knows, she will be more of a pleaser. Then as the relationship deepens, or some wrench gets thrown in the gears of Lauren feeling like, uh-oh, I'm going to be rejected, I don't want to have that happen, then the roles flip. Then she becomes more domineering and he becomes more the pleaser. That can happen. So that's one way of looking at it. Another way, well, let's rewind it and really hear him again.
Spinning. Like, I come from our dates, I feel so good, and then I go to another one and I just feel...
Come from our dates and I feel so good, then I go to another one and I just feel all this pressure. Another way of looking at it is that he is being a pleaser, and that if he were, and we saw this, that when he was in the lounge talking with Devin, that this isn't the way he was talking about it. He was saying, oh no, Lauren's my number one. And he was mainly crying because of worries of his sister. Another way of looking at this is that in his heart, he is gearing up to make a choice. He's already made a choice that he wants to break up with Molly. It certainly looks that way. And he can't do it in a way that is honest, or he doesn't even know what is honest. That's that integrity, honesty thing. Because he wasn't given a chance as a child to really figure out who he was. You know, one of the things about selfhood and being in connection with yourself, having a self, being differentiated, having a basic self in the Murray Bowen terms, is that in the face of situations like this, where your true self, your basic self, your real self is potentially bothersome to another person, which is potentially what's happening here, right? His true self might be that he wants to break up with Molly, he wants to be with Lauren. To be in a room isolated, or, you know, in a situation where you're with someone like Molly who is not approving of, or you would predict that would not approve of, your basic self, what happens in that context? How quickly do you discard your true self? How quickly do you allow that influence? How do you obscure your true self? How do you communicate your true self? And it's looking like his basic self, or his true self, or his connection with himself, or his level of differentiation, under which anyone would experience this pressure and difficulty. But he's had a chance to gear up for it. And we've seen a lot of people in his shoes, and we've seen a lot of people deal with it much differently. That he would, with Molly, be able to hold on. And he would have, if he was more differentiated, he would have notions of like, well, I want to say that I feel good with Molly and Lauren is this other person because that's, if we think about it, that tendency, I've talked about it, that pleasing, but the more I think about it, that sort of knee-jerk reaction of I'm going to put the other person down to uphold what I think this other person wants me to say, which is that you're the one. And I'm going to completely lose touch with myself. And I'm just going to go with that to garner favor or to please the other person or something. Right? It has that look to it. So in this moment, because the way he's describing it right now, it seems like he would be leading up to, and I just broke up with Lauren. But I don't think that's what he's leading up to. I don't know. Yeah, I'm yammering, so maybe you're thinking, Kirk, that is what's happening. If you just watched ahead, and by the way, I'm always thinking, how do I balance my yammering versus the clips on the show and all that stuff? And over the years, I've heard various adamant feedback either direction. Some people say they want less yammering. Some people say they want more. And I edit these as well. I'll edit out, 5, 10, 20 minutes of me yammering. I'll be, I'll just take that out, to get the episodes, more concise. So, I put effort into it. And if I bother any of you, I give it a lot of thought. And I really try to dial it in as best I can. And, there's a wide variety of folks that watch these videos for a wide variety of reasons. And if my style isn't exactly right down the middle for you, I apologize, but the style that I have is a style that I've had, over the years I've sort of vacillated, but I have established a style in the last year that I'm going to continue with. It's just, I'm open to changing a little bit, I suppose, but there's a kind of a sweet spot between all the balances. It's just, I like to process things externally and verbally in life and when I watch the show, so it has something to do with that. But also has to do with people reminding me that, look, if I just wanted to watch the show, I'll watch the show. And if I want to watch someone just have a quick reaction like, oh my God, that was janky or whatever, I don't know why I'm doing this, but then I would watch other reaction video, channels. But I'm watching you because of the yammering. Sure, keep it to a balanced level, but that's why we come. So don't stop doing that. It's literally why we're here. And most people are not into that, I'm sure. Of all the fans of the show, only a minority of folks would also be interested in my channel. But that's what I can provide the internet, So that's me being defensive about something that I have not heard at all. No one has told me that I yammer too little or too much. But I feel like I want to remind people just of that, because if it feels like it's not to your preference, I hear you, and this is the style. And I'm not doing it willy-nilly. It's based on my understanding of what I need and want to do, and also what the average audience wants me to do. I've been doing this now for 5 years and of watching the show, literally, right? Yeah, we're coming up on exactly 5 years. Season 1 was almost exactly 5 years ago. Huh, pretty interesting. Anyway, so yeah, let's rewind this again, because I think this is really interesting.
Until I got into my date with Lauren, and that's when everything, my head started spinning. Like, I come from our dates, I feel so good, and then I go to another one and I just feel all this pressure. And I've been trying really hard to be the best version of myself.
And then he again starts to cry. I'm trying to be the best version of myself. When people cry in this scenario, it can be for a variety of reasons. It could be in the most understandable or relatable way of just I don't know why my dogs are barking all the time. I'm pretty sure there aren't we have coyotes and cats, and not we, but in the woods right outside my house. Even though I live in Seattle proper, I live in a woodsy part of it. And so there's a bit of a wildlife trail by our house of coyotes and rabbits and cats and raccoons and that's all of it, right? I don't you really see opossums. So I'm pretty sure it's not that because it's in the daytime and those, anyway. So I don't know if does it bother you that the dogs bark? It's a little distracting. When I'm editing, I can hear the dogs barking in the background. I'm like, oh, it's a little distracting. Anyway, I have my windows open. I don't know if you can hear the birds. The spring birds are starting to chirp. Anyway, but I think that he's crying a different kind of tear of feeling the pain of repetitive having done the wrong thing to his sister and his mom and having a hammer come down on him and feeling like that conflict of, well, I thought I was a good boy, but I'm not a good boy. It has that vibe. Let's rewind that.
Feel all this pressure, and like I've been trying really hard to like be the best version of myself through it, and it's just gotten like harder.
You know what I mean? I mean, I'm just literally trying to read his mind through an edit of a TV show, as they have all the foreground reflective things, the artsy little reflective things. So I have no idea, but it has that look to it. The tears seem like that of someone that would be saying, I'm trying to be a good boy, and I feel like I can't win at being a good boy. And am I not a good boy?
Oh my God. Oh, I'm so fucked up.
And then, of course, him having lost his mom and probably a complicated relationship heading into it, who knows, but the inadequacy or the complex that he would have around rejection and loss, and how you could imagine him having so much fear of loss and so much fear of, the more this is going on, the more I wonder about an earlier hypothesis that I had, that the complex that he kind of was talking about in the beginning is that he had a lot of issues in the way a lot of maybe above average issues of defiance, lack of integrity, right, with his mom and maybe his sister, I don't know, as a teenager. And then as the mom started to progress into her cancer and then eventually die, it was left unfinished. And, just a lot of jumbled up feelings of, I miss her, but I'm also kind of glad that I don't have to hear that shit anymore. And she is forever frozen in time as seeing me as the person that I was at that time in my life when I was really struggling. And so my way of coping with it is to avoid all of that by just being an ass. And whenever I get close, and I'm getting close to my emotions, as he says, I'll figure out a way to get out of that. But I'm desperate for love, and I'm also, I have an inner child, an inner little boy inside of me that is still desperate for love and unconditional love and acceptance. And I'm purposely going on the show to push past that. I think therapy would have been a better idea, but and I am falling in love with Molly, who represents this kind of oasis away from all that judgment and pressure that I've never experienced before. And it feels so relaxing, but it feels unfamiliar. Is it real? Because love to me is, especially from a woman, a mother figure, is someone that pressures and judges and criticizes. Lauren is being pressury and critical and prickly with me. Is that, logically that would mean that Lauren might care more, okay? But also it's tapping into that thing for me. And I will screw this up one way or the other. And I will be the one who will dump someone, which makes me so sad because I know how that feels to be the rejected one. And I don't want to be that person. I just want to run. But I know that's not good for me, so I'm going to lead in. But I have no way of soothing myself because I've avoided effectively for so long, and so I'm freaking out.
Okay. I mean, do you think that there's a reason that you're so conflicted? I don't know. I mean, we don't have to keep talking about it, but...
I mean, I don't know what else we're going to do.
Yeah, true.
Because I try really hard in my normal life not to make like emotional decisions.
Yeah.
And it's very hard, but like,
It is. I've been focusing on him, but it is interesting her response. Let's rewind that. It was notable and in line with her brand of keeping it light, but it's almost dismissive, or maybe pulling back a little bit from that, is not really comprehending what's happening.
oh my God. I'm so fucked up.
Okay. I mean, do you think that there's a reason that you're so conflicted? Like, I don't know. I mean, we don't have to keep talking about it.
You know what I mean? He's like there's different types of crying, and his crying it has distress in it. It's not a simple cry. It's complicated. It's stuttering. The words are sort of squirting out, and it's like, oh, I'm so fucked up. And then she's like, well, is there, this completely disconnected response to that. Now, she's confused, so it'd be hard to know what to say, but it feels disconnected, and I'm going to take a guess to say she just is so unfamiliar with this sort of thing that she just doesn't know what's happening, or she's a little bit more self-centered, so she's more thinking like, well, what does this mean for us? That kind of thing. And then she follows it up with, we don't have to keep talking about it. And okay, but even that word, keep talking about it. We don't have to keep talking about this forever. That word keep kind of says something. But also, wouldn't you want to talk about this?
But
I mean, I don't know what else we're gonna do.
yeah, true.
Because I try really hard in my normal life not to make like emotional decisions.
Yeah.
And it's very hard, but like,
But it is emotion. Like,
I know.
the decision in itself is the most emotional decision you can make.
Now, I can get behind that. And I suppose another hypothesis is that Dave is manipulating to trick Molly into thinking that he has a heart, as he is he doesn't care, and he's about to break up with her, and is drumming up all this act so that he can look sympathetic to her or to the audience as he is about to break up with someone, because he knows that he will look bad, at least in Molly's eyes, or to the audience or something. It doesn't look that way to me, but I think some people might be thinking that.
Like, I'm not worried. Like, obviously, I know what I want. You know how I feel, but I'm not here to, like, force anything. Absolutely not.
I know, and that's what I've like really liked about you. Everything's so fun, and that's freaking me out. I'm really struggling with this.
So, which is okay, and I think it's real that he came into this date with Molly intending on breaking up with her. It started out that way, at least to my eyes, and he pulls back because he has a hard time, as anyone would, right? Especially if you weren't sure. But also, you don't want to hurt someone's feelings, and particularly if you have a complex around disappointing women, like his mom and his sister. But also, with enough time, he is reminded of just how easy she is and how cool she is, right? But it also has this confusing nature of, well, then does she really love me that much? I mean, shouldn't you really be upset if the love of your life were to break up with you just before getting engaged? I mean, shouldn't that bother her? But it doesn't even, she's like saying it's not a big deal. So is she fake, or is she just so mature and strong that she absolutely loves me, but loves herself enough to say that it's okay if it doesn't work out? And honestly, from the outside, I can't really tell. Independent of Dave and Lauren, just seeing Molly's reaction, I think it does produce some caution in me of, does she, and I wouldn't characterize her as faking to get to the next phase, although some people will do that. But at the very least, she either hasn't allowed herself to go deeper and really wrestle with this, which may or may not be a bad thing, because she just seems so nonchalant about it. But, maybe that's just how she expresses herself. People can be in love and be nonchalant about it, right? But then you hear, she's never had a boyfriend before. I mean, so this is essentially her first boyfriend potentially, right? And so for your very, very first boyfriend in your entire life, I mean, y'all think back on your first big romantic partner. And especially if you're this close to getting engaged, you remember how intense that was, right? It's no joke. So to just be like, so if I were to take a guess, I would say it indicates that Molly, for whatever reason, there's some kind of barrier there or something. And she doesn't know that she has more room, a lot more room to go to feel what other people would feel. And, I phrased it that because it's like, well, does she have to? No. But yeah, it's interesting. She doesn't really talk a lot about her process, so I don't know. But there's a question mark there. Anyway, I think right now he's talking himself into either they're both number one or Molly's number one now, which you say, oh my God. And I think this is evidence of, or at least I said this, I think, a while back about Dave and these folks is, Molly and Lauren, is that there's some potential there, but this is a huge indicator that you should not rush, that you should give it a few years of dating, maybe casually date Molly and Lauren, and they can date other people and just see what happens, and don't rush it, because at the very least, Dave and Lauren or Dave and Molly can admit that they don't have any experience. I mean, if you're Molly, why would you come on if you've never had a boyfriend and you're like, I'm ready to get married, the very first person that is my boyfriend I'm going to marry, and I'm going to do it within 2 months, like, would we say like a 16-year-old should go on Love is Blind developmentally in terms of romance or experience anyway?
Do you need to think about it, or like what's your...
See, that's what I'm trying to say. I'm not trying to make a super emotional decision, but like, I don't know. I literally never cry either.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's interesting. He is saying he doesn't cry ever, probably rarely, right? He's certainly crying a lot now, so something is being unearthed. And again, not the time to make a decision about it. It sounds like a lot of trauma and a lot of issues are coming up, which is fine, and I'm glad for him, I guess. And that would not be the time to make a decision as to whether or not you should get married or not. I just wish that they could pull a ripcord and say, let's all just date outside the show and see where things are going, because I'm overwhelmed and I can't handle this. But I think a lot of the cast members on the show would say, if I do that, I'll just go back to the way things were, and I know what happens when that happens. This might be my one chance, and it might be.
Appreciate that you're like showing emotion and crying. Like I really don't think that's a bad thing. Like I don't think you're a bad person either way.
Fuck. I hate that it's like this, but yeah, I do have, like, me and Lauren, I feel like I do have to like see that through.
Okay. And kudos to Molly for reading between the lines and priming the pump, essentially, and giving him permission to do this, because it looked like he was going to work himself into another downward spiral of indecision. So her saying that, Molly saying like, hey, if, I appreciate that you're crying. It's essentially saying that shows that you care. If you're about to break up with me, I appreciate that this means a lot to you. That's nice. But if you got to break up with me, then, you can, that's okay. You can do that. So kudos to Molly, because I was worried that this was going to become another Leo situation and be prolonged way too far. And so he takes the bait and says, I feel like I do have to see this through. Yeah. Okay. So I am excited to see how Dave and Lauren do in person. I'm really curious, because I could see it going well and I could see it going not well.
Yeah. Do you feel like you guys have that emotional connection more then?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah? So then I feel like you've made your decision, right?
I hate that it's like that though. I hate that it's like I made a decision. Like,
I mean, you can say that.
yeah, I mean,
You're
yeah, I'm
allowed to say that.
Okay. I just
Molly, the breakup coach, as she's being broken up with. Yeah, so you can say it, you know. So don't beat around the bush. If that's how it is, then that's how it is, and don't make excuses and don't beat around the bush and don't beat yourself up. That's the name of the game. Yeah, yeah. And if things do work out between Dave and Lauren, every time that Lauren is pressury in some way or is upset, you know he's going to be thinking about Molly, right? Or I don't know, but you would imagine the one that got away, right? Why, in his head, why can't you be like Molly? And they have a kid, and he's like, I was thinking about naming our daughter Molly. What do you think about that, Lauren?
why are you so cool about it? I don't get that.
I say all that because I have heard from a lot of clients and personal relationships people, friends, that will say, or I'll hear initially will be that they'll be going through difficulties in their marriage, and then later, not all of the time, it doesn't. In fact, this is a minority of the time, but it's enough. There's enough of it of a theme that I think it's a human thing to do that. When you have prolonged difficulty in a marriage, whether it's conflict or distance or something, then at a certain point, there is an effort to escape that difficulty. And one of the ways that people escape is to recall that person that you connected with just before having met your current partner. And especially if it's a situation like this where Dave and Molly have had no conflict at all. So if, and there would be conflict between Lauren and Dave just because everyone has conflict, but I would imagine there would be a fair amount just because of the two of them. So you could imagine of his mind recalling Molly and thinking, oh, why can't she be like Molly? And it becomes this fantasy, and it can be blown way out of proportion in someone's mind. It can result in infidelity, of course, but it also can result in this idealized fantasy that your current partner can never live up to. And you can end up just living in that distorted world. Sometimes what will happen is the divorce will happen, and then the Daves of the world will go back to the Mollys, and if the Mollys are single, then there's a relationship that happens, and then the Daves of the world realize, oh, I had a fantasy. My relationship with Molly isn't what I had blown it up in my mind to be. And the way to think about it is that as that fantasy is occurring, the fantasy isn't real, but it's an indication of a desire to need a fantasy of an escape. So then you can work your way backward to, well, what am I escaping from, and how can I help that situation so that I don't need that fantasy to escape? Or do I need to break up? What's going on with me? Or can I improve the relationship so that I don't need that fantasy?
I'm not cool deep down about it, but I have consistently said from the beginning that I want someone to choose me. I'm confident in myself and what I bring to the table, and
yeah,
I know that if someone's not choosing me, they're not my person.
So, Dave, now would be a good time to just say that you're sorry. That would be a good thing to say. Just like, I'm so sorry. And I'm sorry that, I'll tell you, so a really good thing for him to say, for Molly's sake and maybe for the audience's sake, to avoid being the villain of the season, is to say to Molly, look, I am so sorry. I am thinking back to some of our dates, and there's a chance that I was leading you on, or not leading you on. There's a chance that here's what was happening. For a long time, you were my number one, and I would talk as if it was just a matter of time before we were going to get engaged. When I was with you, it did feel that way. And I'm not used to emotions and these feelings. And looking back, I should have felt the feelings, but I should have waited before communicating that stuff. When we talked about rings, and I am regretting doing that. It felt right at the time. I wasn't lying, but I was going too fast. And then I would have a date with Lauren, and I would have feelings for her, and I'm just not used to having all these feelings because, you know, he knows that about himself. And I don't know how to interpret them. And I still do have a lot of feelings for you. But as he says, I want to see it through with Lauren. And so I feel bad for doing that. Now, Molly would probably say, hey, it's fine. You know, it's cool. She would roll with it. But, you know, maybe she would want to hear that, at least for the future narrative that she might have in her mind about what happened. And another thing that would be good, at least for Lauren's sake, for him to get out ahead of, is he could say, you know, I know I said that she's been pressuring me. That's not the best way to put it. Independent of each of your pressure or non-pressure to me, I've just been trying to figure out which one of you is a good match for me. And it's been really hard because you are different. There's some similarities, but you're different. And I'm choosing to be with Lauren because it's hard to predict the future, but I think things might work out with her. I could totally see things working out with you too. So there's that. But if I was to guess, I would say I have a better chance with Lauren. I don't know. And me making this choice doesn't have anything to do with pressuring me. So I'm making this choice on my own. So I'm not going to throw Lauren under the bus. I know I said that earlier. You know, maybe that would help too. I doubt he's going to do that. But so I think, you know, something along those lines. And, you know, for me, I'm role playing maybe what I would want to hear or maybe what I would have the impulse to say. There's a lot of other versions or different things, different angles, but something along those lines of just like, I'm sorry. And also, I'm just sorry for breaking up with you. And I feel terrible. And I feel, retrospectively, I feel bad that I was giving the impression otherwise, and I shouldn't have done that. I shouldn't have been so hasty.
So can you tell me like what you want right now? Tell me in your ideal world what happens right now.
So that's a pretty good question. I thought it was done, but I think what she's saying is, well, I'm not hearing definitive. So is he saying he's still trying to decide? Because if we're there, then I'm fine with giving it another day or two because I'm not doing anything else. And if we're done, then I guess I would just go home. And I think they actually just have to go to the hotel until the end of the 10. I don't know. Anyway, so it's a good question to ask, but I don't think I think it would just push things down the road. And since he can't do things on his own, her saying that, I could see him taking the bait and saying, oh, well, yeah, you know, I'm still trying to figure things out. And I don't think that's good for anybody. Or I'm just an outside triangulated third, just wanting things to be non-messy, which is annoying when I see that happening. So I don't want to do that. Things are messy. Things get messy. And if this gets messy, it gets messy. Things are messy. They're always messy. We don't normally see the messy on the show. You know, your Bretts and Tiffany's probably have a lot of mess. In fact, I think they even said something like that at one of the reunions where they're like, look, we have our issues too. Mess is okay. Let's embrace the mess. And let's also not be afraid of the mess, especially if we're a triangulated third.
What do you mean?
I feel like you're trying to say that you're choosing her, but without saying that, and make me make the decision.
No, I'm not.
Are you trying to end it with me? I think you should own your decision and make it.
Yeah, they're playing the ominous music. And, I mean, and Molly said it, which is good. She's like, look, I came here wanting to be with someone that wanted to be with me. I didn't want to be with someone that didn't want to be with me. So she has her answer. She, according to that, and there's a lot of wisdom to just saying, even if he doesn't definitively say it, I don't want to be with him now. So I'm out. I'm outie. So I don't know what good this does other than it's fair. I'm the one that has led you down the road, and all you have done was basically not oppose it. So I feel like I deserve a definitive answer from you. Are you breaking up with me right now? Yeah, yeah. And maybe a lot of us would say that Molly deserves to be told, it's like when people are broken up with over text or something. The effect is the same, but you can feel like you would want some respect. But if you have to ask for it, right? But and I'm glad this is happening because, well, I'm not glad it's happening, but it's a good example of he would absolutely, you could see him absolutely being a ghoster and a breakup texter. You could see that. Or someone that prolongs a relationship, wants to break up but can't, and provokes the other person to leaving him. You could absolutely see that, right? And that is not good. The way it's framed is manipulative and Machiavellian and narcissistic, but I would imagine that y'all would see this and see that there's something going on with him, right? And it's not pleasant, and it's all busted up, and he doesn't know what's happening, and he's in a lot of distress. And that's what happens. That's typically, almost all the time, the foundation for a breakup text or a ghost or something like that. To be a recipient of it is to not see any of that suffering typically. You would just get the breakup text, and or you think you're exclusive, and then on Instagram you see them with someone else. You're just like, what the hell? And all these, labels of what do they call it? Crumbs? Some breadcrumbing and love bombing, and anyway. And it could be, but now I'm not saying if you're the Mollies of the world, you're supposed to like celebrate it and have empathy. You don't have to. It's still dickish. He is a grown man, as I've been saying, and it's not hard for him to just buckle down and just say the words, I break up with you and I'm sorry. But imagine what sort of thing is happening for him right now regarding his mom and his sister. Just if that is an hypothesis that you're entertaining like I am, imagine how overwhelming that presence is and how it is with him at all times, and it's completely unresolved, and he cannot push past it in the moment. That's the way it looks to me. So if he fails in this moment, which I'm guessing he will in part, one hypothesis is the way I'm framing it. All right. Well, interesting episode. Everyone out there, please take care of yourself because you deserve it. You really, really do.